Ladies and gentlemen, it is with deep regret that I have to inform you that the hero's journey is broken. And in this podcast with Matt, we talk about storytelling, and something that, I say in the podcast is that everyone's always, tell your story, tell your story. What does that actually really mean? Storytelling has been hijacked by marketing, in case you didn't know. There's a lot of misinformation around the world, which is bad storytelling or manipulated storytelling. And what Matt advocates with his Antidote Project is focusing on things like housing, energy, decision-making, but at a very, very local level. There's this whole globalization thing. We love the word global and we love the word global solutions, but everything is in our neighborhoods. And a lot of what we talk about in the Co-working Values podcast is about our neighborhoods, our community, and how to actually make that happen in a day-to-day, face-to-face, relatable way within our little bit of the world that we live in. And if we all focus on a little bit of the world that we live in, it will have a massive impact. And Matt unpicks all of that in this longer than usual episode, but I kept quiet the whole thing. I was taking notes, even though I was making a podcast. So without further ado, let's get into Matt. Hello, folks. It is this week's or this year's best Co-working Values podcast ever. I'm like wildly excited because I've got Matt in the studio. Matt, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for, sir?
So I am a filmmaker. I've got a background in viral campaigns, but currently I am learning how we change the way we tell stories around collective action to help us all believe we can change the world.
That's what I want to talk to you about today, which is obviously why we're here. I'm trying to find a way to get into it, Matt, because it's so exciting. What is, can you say a little bit about Antidote? And then I've got a question.
So Antidote is a project that I've been running for 4 years, which has been exploring how we change the way we approach progressive and collective action storytelling to overcome our inherent belief that changing the world is really hard and that we're never going to crack it, into a form of storytelling that makes it sound, which I think is the truth, that collective action, if we all contribute a bit, is fundamentally the only and the main way we can change the world. It's almost inevitable, and that it feels invitational, exciting, and like something you want to join in with.
And I just feel that people like me have gone, it's all about your story. And then I remember maybe like 10 or more years ago, I go to all these like social media week events, and there'd be people with big black glasses from agencies, in skin type jeans that they're too old to wear, and the person, not the jeans. And they'd say, it's all about the narrative. Matt, it's all about the narrative. It's story. Storytelling is the transformation of seamless integration. I mean, what do you mean? And then, and then I started to meet people that actually just told stories. And I think those people are a lot to blame, which is why I highlight it. I think it confuses. And I was confused, still am a little bit, but, it confuses micro business owners, people from not-for-profits and charities are like, what's this like smoke in a jar story thing that will solve all my problems? And what is broken in that? And like, where can we start to head to unfuck our storytelling?
Well, that is a really good question. And first of all, I totally agree. Like, the word storytelling has been abused mostly by, overpaid people in marketing to kind of claim that they are doing storytelling when a lot of the time they're not. They're just selling stuff. And so it's kind of possibly got a bit murky. I guess my background in storytelling is completely self-taught. Like, I don't have any training. I mean, I do a little bit. I've done some training in filmmaking, but I set up an organization. I just actually started making films with friends out of our bedrooms when we finished university 20 years ago, and taught ourselves how you do it. This was at the dawn of the internet, and when we made things, we put them out, and we were making comedy. We found that we could get things shared, and we just taught ourselves by doing it. And so my approach to storytelling is mostly empirically taught to myself by trying it and failing and learning. And I guess all I mean by storytelling is how we share things with each other and what belief it creates in us, and how that shapes the way we orientate ourselves to the world, feel, believe, and do things. So I don't have any kind of pretentious wider kind of context for it, but I do think that the storytelling kind of embraces all of these things. So I don't want to undermine what I just said, but like everything we do, the way we tell news, the way we structure narratives in movies, the way we talk to each other in the pub, the way we do marketing and advertising, all of these things create a world in which certain things are normalized and certain things aren't. And the stories we tell shape the world that we inhabit. Like I blame storytelling to a large extent for a lot of the problems that we're facing. So when I'm looking at it, I'm not looking at it as like, oh, it's just storytelling can save the world. I'm like, no, storytelling done badly has created the problems in the world, and we should probably look there for ways we can change things to improve things. And from trying it, I found there are lots of things we can do. There are lots of things that we're repeatedly doing wrong that really don't help. And if we changed, could really help us see that together we can create a better world and make it seem more visionary, exciting, and fun to join in with.
That was really interesting, the way you said a lot of the stories in the world are what we created. Randomly, do you know happen to know who Edward Said is?
Yes, I do.
Thank goodness for that. So in his book, I'll put a link in the show notes. Basically, his thing is like the West. Let me get this right. The West invented the East. So like Charles Dickens went to India and the Middle East and came back and told people like you and me in London, that's what it's like out there. So there's this like misrepresenting. That's a very high level thing. And there's a lot of manipulation in storytelling, and it's I know I'm very angry that we've entered to this point. So how do we, if I'm like most people listening to this are, I'm going to say, community organizers or co-working space owners or managers and stuff like that, and they might be opening up a building, but they have a leadership role, if you like, in their local community, and how could they begin to get into what you're talking about?
Okay, so I'm going to do this bit backwards. I'm first of all going to say the most recent thing that I've done, because a lot of what I'm trying to do is learn by doing it. So, look at what I'm doing, see if you think it's helpful or not. But the most recent thing I've done is I've made a podcast with Mariam Pasha and Immediate, the podcast and magazine company between things like Radio Times, Good Food, Gardener's World. We've made a podcast called Screw This, Let's Try Something Else, which aims to demonstrate how we could tell collective action stories in a different way. So you can get it on Apple, on Spotify, check it out. It's only 6 episodes. And the goal of that is to show how telling stories in this different way that we've developed can help more people engage with them, relate to them, believe in them, and for us all to see how change is possible. So the first thing I'd say is check out the podcast. The next thing I'd say is, prior to that, we set up and are still running social media channels on Instagram and TikTok. So Antidote Live on Instagram and Antidote_Live on TikTok are our social media channels demonstrating shorter form ways to tell collective action stories in a different way. So you can check those out and see what you think. But to then go back one step before that, where that's all come from is an exploration of how we could share collective action stories in ways that resonate more broadly. And that took me on a journey. The podcast is 4 years down the line of trying to learn how to do this. And what I first realized was that, I'm going to say this quickly, but two steps. Like, one, the way we generally tell collective action stories is really not great. And that's not just collective action. It's all stories of kind of change, positive change in our society. We don't tend to do that very well, I have found from my observation. And some of the roots of that are in the deeper storytelling archetypes of our culture. Like, most of the story archetypes in our culture are from the hero's journey narrative arc, which is 2,000 plus years old, and like has been governing or dominating our kind of storytelling landscape since at least the Romans and ancient Greeks. And these things date back a long way. But when I started looking into why we don't do change storytelling well now, some of it has roots in that. So to give an example, like a classic, we live in this very individualistic, very extractive, very violent culture. We have colonized the world, our culture, from the UK and Europe, and we've dominated lots of others. And as you say, we've told the stories of this in our own way. So like often we are the saintly kind of people bringing joy and peace to the world, when actually we just went and did multiple genocides. But we've normalized that, and that's partly from the hero's journey. Like if you look back to ancient Greece, I've got a 5-year-old. His grandma gave him a book of Jason and the Argonauts a couple of years ago, and I started reading it. And page 1, you're like, this group of people set out to steal the golden fleece. You're like, okay, so theft is normalized on page 1. It's probably going to be some death involved in getting that. But this is okay because we're on the side of these people. This is fine. They're the heroes of this story. And the hero's journey, often the way I was taught it. So I did study film for a bit. And that kind of comes from Aristotle's Poetics, like the original backbone of a Western narrative arc dates all the way back to there. So a lot of the stuff you learn on like Sid Field's filmmaking course is also, quite old stuff. But often the way that we're telling these stories is that the person, the main character, say it's Tom Cruise, on some journey, or like think Star Wars, think Lord of the Rings, like they are archetypal hero's journey narratives. The normal way that they're framed is that the hero has a want and a need. They understand the want. Oh, I want to kind of bring peace to my area, or like stabilize this thing. It can be quite a nice, virtuous thing. They have a need, which is to overcome some personal thing that they've got to, and that's the emotional journey they've got to go on. That can justify so much damage in our culture. Like we can then tell a story once you've got those two things, where hundreds of orcs die, stormtroopers become like cannon fodder, all kinds of destruction can happen. But as long as we're following the main character's emotional learning, then the structure works, which is quite extractive, quite violent, and quite binary. And not very great for most of the people in the story necessarily. And I'm not saying there can't be good sides to it and you can't tell good stories with it. But when I started looking, I was like, hang on, there's some problems with that. And then I started looking back at like how we tell change stories. And that, in a much more simple way, also has some challenges. Like we often, if I imagine a normal community action video on a website, having looked at a bunch over the last 5 years, they're normally like 7 to 10 minutes long. They'll often have like a fair amount about the problem, or this is starting to change now, so don't take this as criticism of anyone who's listening, but like historically they would often talk a lot about the problem and they'd get to some ideas, but they don't contextualize those ideas in a really empowered, really exciting way. Like often amazing ideas are embedded in a load of community action, but they're kind of almost quite mutedly, humbly shared. And there's something really lovely about that because people aren't blowing their own trumpet. But I'm like, these are the world-changing ideas that will shift our culture, and we need to shout about them. The different way we do circular or regenerative economics in our local communities, the different way we think in a balanced way about how we can tackle things that are in line with nature, with the climate, and bring down our bills and make things work in an inclusive way for a diverse community. Those are brilliant ideas. Our leaders in inverted commas, aren't doing that. They're not able to do that. Our corporations aren't able to do that. Those are world-changing ideas, and we need to talk about them like that. So part of what we do to simplify the model we've created, we first of all realize that not all stories are unifying and bring us together. And in this moment, we really need stories that bring us together. So collective action has to focus around collective interests. So as an example, climate, I would argue, is not a collective interest right now. Everybody is on board that we should do something about it. Like 89%, the stats say, of people support more action on climate. But we are also living through massive inequality, a cost of living crisis, huge tension and division in our society. So a lot of people, while supporting that, might not feel it's their main day-to-day interest. They might just need to put food on the table. They just need to pay their rent. So we focus through the way we do our storytelling on things that bring us together. And the 4 things we identified are energy, food, housing, and decision-making. So we tell all stories framed around those key framings. So that's the orientation from which we tell the story. Even though there might be climate, environment, nature, economic action in there, we tell it from that base because we all need those things. So that framing tends to bring us together, not push us apart. And then the way we tell them, we've created a framework. We always tell stories where we tell the positive thing first, excite people about the vision of the world that is being created. These are amazing actions in communities that are creating a vision of a world that works better for the vast majority of people. Like well over 90% of people are not any longer served by extractive Western capitalism. And so these are brilliant ideas. So we tell those ideas up front. We acknowledge the problem, but we always share the positive thing first. We explain clearly how those things could spread to create a vision of a world that is completely different, relatable because it's based on a practical example that we can see and share, but different than the world we're in. So you can start to see that scaling effect. And we always mention how many other people are working on this. So we bring it right down. The three things we pull out of that to simplify it are: bring it down to an action you can take part in today to take part in this great idea. Scale that up to say, well, and what would society look like if this spread everywhere? And network it, and mention the fact that this example we're sharing is not the only example of this amazing collective action. This is happening everywhere. This example of regenerative agriculture is just one of 999 others across the UK. Or this example of people coming together to create homes, roofs over their heads in a more affordable, equitable, fair way is just one example of hundreds across the UK of communities experimenting with different ways to provide homes for ourselves.
That is amazing. The going back to the video, when you said that, they're 7 to 10 minutes long, and I want to. When you said that, I could just hear Coldplay music playing, like Yellow, and it's like every year, 15,000 freelancers are unable to find work, and it's that kind of cliched thing. So how do you? I'm not asking you for a lesson in filmmaking, but as you're going around and you're seeing people doing things, how do you see people getting the right type of attention? And is that kind of way of storytelling we're stuck in, and the way you're looking to change it, how much is it to do with our attention span versus what we're actually talking about?
That's a really interesting question, and there are two answers to that. One of them is, but I'm going to break it into three, actually. Sorry. Firstly, we have to acknowledge that social media exists. And so, yes, there is an element of this where you could tell these stories better in social media, but I'm going to ignore that. That is not my focus, even though my background is in making viral and shareable campaigns. And I've made lots of campaigns that millions of people watched on the internet. I do not think that is a helpful framing for this question, because social media, as we know, has toxic algorithms. It drives storytelling behaviors and habits that are not very helpful. So let's park that one. We can come back to it and acknowledge, okay, after we've thought this all through, let's work out how to deploy it in social media. But that is not the most useful framing. That's being driven by the problems in the system to think in that way. So what I found much more interesting and useful to focus on, and where I started was, well, the beginning of this journey for me was that I'd been doing a lot of campaigning and work around the environment and social justice, and I'd been working for organizations, bringing my skills from viral storytelling to those issues and trying to do that for 2 years. So in 2019, I rebooted my content studio, Rubber Republic, to focus only on positive storytelling. I say that, I mean positive, working for people doing positive things. And after 2 years of doing that, I'd worked for some great organizations, but that was where I really started to feel this challenge with progressive storytelling, that we're often spending a lot of time talking about the problem. The challenges are real, but that doesn't mean it's helpful, I don't think, to always talk about them like a massive uphill struggle, because there are other ways to frame these things. So I looked at it, and I looked back on 2 years of work I did between 2019 and 2021 and just realized that we were just telling people what not to do, what to cut down on, about problems in the world and how we could maybe legislate to kind of minimize them a bit. And we were doing it with humor and heart, but we were still fundamentally telling people off or telling people what not to do. And that was never going to work. So then I started thinking, well, let's tell some positive stories. And so initially, just thought, well, there's loads of amazing community action. Let's tell positive stories of some of this community action. And the plan was to set up a YouTube channel, tell 50, and see what happened. And we started that process, and we did a bit of work around the bounce back from the pandemic. And I'm going to gloss over some of the detail, but the important learning from that was that it didn't work very well. And while there were reasons for that, the most interesting one related to this kind of world of storytelling was that a lot of the pushback we got wasn't that people weren't necessarily interested. They just fundamentally didn't believe that this stuff would ever create a scale of change that was meaningful. And that wasn't just from people you might think, there were these people who were ideologically opposed to what we were doing. They're like really staunch capitalists, and they're just like, this is a crazy, stupid idea. We don't like this. It wasn't that. It was that people who were kind of on side, we've all grown up so individualized, so driven to compete with each other, to build our £1 million business idea and get on Dragon's Den or whatever. We've normalized so many of these toxic ideas that when you come in and say, hang on, together in our communities, maybe if we just shifted some things and all just did an hour a week, we could change the world. People are like, no, but that'll never cut it. So the pushback was internal. So really what Antidote is about is learning, how do you change the shape of storytelling to overcome that? How do you help tell stories so that we can all extract ourselves from that false, disempowered position that we find ourselves in, where we just don't think that we're ever going to get it together to change things in a big way, and make it clear that we can and we are. I mean, it sounds absurd. Like what I'm about to say might sound absurd, and it is simplistic, but the systems that we live within are so broken that so many people are now not served, and so many people recognize that. There are 8 billion people on this planet, and a tiny minority of them are now served by the system, and yet we all feel we can't change it. The reality is, of course we can change it. We just need to learn how to align ourselves together to point in the direction where our shared interests are. And storytelling is a key part of that. So how do we help tell stories to orientate ourselves in that way and start to refine that truth that together we can create big change? And so some of that was changing the way we gave the information to people, changing the way we speak, changing the way we tell the stories.
The other thing that really appeals to me about the way you do, particularly those 6 episodes, is that I feel they're all people, some of those people I know already, but I feel I could walk out my front door and meet those people. It's not like Greta Thunberg sailing on a boat on the way to Gaza. It's like it's within my neighborhood, and it's doable. I think there's something about the relatableness, because and this popped into my head when you were talking about business owners and startups and stuff like that. Everyone goes, I want to be, I hope they don't, but they go like, oh, I want to be Elon Musk. The amount of tech bros around Old Street who are like, yeah, Elon Musk, maybe not so much now, and really I'm more interested in people who are in my network. I feel I can learn more from them directly than watching a keynote on YouTube at TechCrunch or something. It's the relatableness I think is important, which I kind of asking you about, but never getting to the question. Sorry.
Well, no, and that is a really key thing. So what I might do, I can really quickly run through the filter and the framework that we've developed. So because it speaks to that. So this filter and framework were developed by reverse engineering what didn't work. So we tried telling collective action stories in lots of ways, and it didn't work. And eventually I got frustrated, and I was like, hang on, what's going on here? Why do people not believe collective action can change the world? And I started to group the pushbacks we were getting and created a filter that eliminated the stories that were just never going to work because they had a fundamental issue that meant that people were just not going to believe. And then we created a framework to work out, well, okay, and with what's left, how do you tell those stories in ways that can create change? And I'm going to whip through it because there's like 8 points on each one, so I don't want to take too long. But in terms of the filter, we always focus on stories that have unexpected success, because we do still like exciting stories. Like there's some of this that is human nature and I can't overcome. There's a lot of it that I don't think is human nature. We've normalized a lot of normalized a lot of myths about human nature. Like we're aggressive, competitive, violent, except we're not. We're lovely, kind, creative, brilliant, collaborative creatures. So there's a lot of rubbish out there, but we do still need interesting stories that excite us. So an unexpected success, it has to address a universal need that brings us together. It has to be about a uniting subject, so that's something that the majority of us could all agree that if that was better, we'd want it. And as I've said, climate action is not one of those things right now. That doesn't mean that climate action isn't embedded in every story we tell. It is, but it isn't the thing we open with, because, there's a lot of people who are too busy surviving to kind of be attracted to that right now. It has to come from humble beginnings. Like, we don't tell any stories from communities who exhibit elements of what others could perceive as privilege, whether that's financial, racial, whatever, social, whatever it is. And that includes not having undue training or expertise in things, because so many of the communities that are doing the best work are really relearning everything from ground zero. They're not bringing necessarily previous expertise or skills to the table. So they're proving you don't need those things. So let's share that, because we don't want to create these individual heroes like Elon Musk. I mean, all the individual heroes that we have in our world are psychopathic nutters who really we shouldn't be aspiring to be anything like. The amazing people are the collaborative, kind, collective, humble individuals in the communities all around us who are working together with each other, with humility, with kindness, with generosity. So let's tell those stories, embracing that and normalizing that, to prove that you don't need amazing, stupid expertise to do this stuff. Normal people are already doing this all around us. It has to be around a thing that could travel. Like, we don't tell any stories about collective action to fix a harbour on a coastal town, because a lot of towns don't have a harbour. So it has to be spreadable to where you are. It has to have some push on the economic model to prove different economic systems are possible and that it could become economically self-sustaining. It's not just a charity. This is a viable, different way to do things that could wash its own face. In theory, it doesn't have to be doing it now. It has to be part of a movement. All of these things are. But we identify that and we speak about it. Like, we say, this is an example of a bigger movement for change. And it has to be something you can get involved in. We don't tell any stories around things that you can't participate in. So going back to the idea, you don't need deep or unusual skills to do this. We actively want to tell stories that invite people in to participate, because we're trying to drive people invitationally into a greater sense of action and involvement. And so there has to be something you can do to help. That's the filter, and that plays to that. And then in terms of the way we tell them, we open with a values connection. What do we all care about that this is addressing? What is the amazing visionary idea this community is bringing to the table that could change everything? Like, and we sell that. Don't be ashamed. That is brilliant stuff. Like, that's what we need to change our society. We acknowledge the crisis is averting, but only to value the fact that this is an important idea tackling an important issue. But we don't spend a lot of time talking about the problem or the crisis that it's helping address, because we're assuming our audience already have some lived experience of that, and so we can just kind of acknowledge it. We talk about that spreadability. We picture that future that is created if this idea spread, which is eminently possible practically, because we've seen it work somewhere. This could work everywhere. What would the country be like, or the world be like, if that worked everywhere? We mention the movement in the story. Like, we talk about the movement that we've identified in the filter, and we tell people how they could get involved. So there's a call to action or an invitation, and we make sure that invitation is plural. We don't offer people one thing they can do, because we know that people feel railroaded if we tell stories in ways that at the end of a brilliant story, it's like, so click this link and sign this petition. It's like, oh, you just hoodwinked me the whole time just to do this one thing you wanted me to do. Like, it has to be something that offers me, the listener or viewer, my own agency. We're trying to encourage storytelling that encourages agency. We have to allow people agency in how they participate. So there has to be an invitation that could have multiple ways you could get involved if you want. It's up to you. Like, no pressure. We understand you're busy, but if you do want to get involved, here's where you start.
How do so one of the things we're talking, I don't know what language to use now, Matt. Like, I'm making people show the Actionism documentary with Ellie and John and the Reaction Collective in co-working spaces, and that is like, I know you know that film, but
Yeah.
people show that in a co-working space. They invite people from the local area in, and it instigates conversations with. So it's not like trying to get people in the building and have them sign up for a desk. It's connecting with the local community. And the way that movie works or documentary works is people start talking about things in a way they might not have talked about if they met in the queue at Tesco's or something like that. So that is a very simple action a co-working space can take, and it has a lot in it for the community around. And that seems like the kind of thing that would travel really well in the way you're talking. What's your experience of that documentary?
So I know Gav and Heather and Ellie. I know all of it, and I know John. I know the team behind that. They're brilliant people, and I'm part of the wider community that they're driving with Actionism, and I love what they're doing. So I'm a huge advocate and supporter of that film, of the team, of that kind of way of thinking, and that very much ties in with what I'm doing through Antidote and the podcast. I mean, I think it's great, and I think that we just need more of it. Like, that's, I guess, my thought. That it's a brilliant way to start, and what where we got to with Antidote and with the stories we're sharing. Firstly, we're trying to inspire people with how big this change can get, and that doesn't mean we're trying to make it off-putting, but this is a way to transform our entire experience of the world. I'd say transform the world, but I mean, ultimately, I've got to contextualize us that we are humans. The pigeons may or may not agree, but like these are ideas that can change the world. And they can change it in ways that are really fundamental. So the reason we focus on stories around food, energy, housing, and decision-making is because those are really important things we all need to survive. And we can shift those things too. So that doesn't mean that's where you have to start doing collective action. You could start anywhere you like literally anything. Just get cracking. It's fine. Take what interests you. And so John is great at talking about that. Find the others, find what you love and excites you, and get moving in your area. So I fully embrace that. And I guess part of what we're trying to do is just, when we choose the examples we share, show just how far that can go. That in Bristol, the community in the first episode of our podcast rewrote the entire housing policy for their area. A working class community on the outskirts of Bristol. Is now illegal for any developer to build a home there with a gas boiler, without an electric car charging point, or without top-notch insulation, because the community came together and rewrote the legal underpinning for developers coming into their area to make sure that the houses that get built there have to comply with what the local people want. They then went on to build the biggest community-owned wind turbine in the country and make $100,000 a year from it. Like, that means that they're taking transformative action on those big bills that go out of our door every month, our rent, our energy, our food, and shifting that money back into a regenerative economy, a well-being economy, whatever you want to call it. And that over time totally changes the game. So we can start this stuff with anything we like, a community garden, a litter pick in our local area, something small. But we can also, as we learn to kind of train ourselves in this muscle of collective agency, we can take that to transform the fundamentals that we need to live and where most of our money goes. And when that money starts flowing differently, that's when the whole thing starts to shift, because you're really empowering yourselves to make decisions in a different way, because you're doing it with the bits of your life that you need to survive and where a lot of your money goes. So we need more of the storytelling, and we're trying to push how bold we can be with how and what we tell in terms of this space.
The last little thing, because I was thinking about that wind turbine, that somewhere in here, Matt, there's a question. Okay. But I feel that, people love to talk about global all the time. There's this obsession with, global solutions and all this kind of stuff. And, my argument has always been, and this is why I love all the stuff we're talking about in the citizenship, it's like, it all needs to happen in our neighborhood. And I can, watch ICE agents, I have a lot of friends in America and they're being screwed over by all of that. But, I can watch that on YouTube all day, but it doesn't actually make a difference in my neighborhood. And, even TED, God bless him, it's all like TED Global. But I think, like TEDx in Brum made a massive, the way that crew went about TEDx in Birmingham in the 2013 or whenever it was, and what came out of that, which is now what is Civic Square, is an example of like focusing like a laser beam in your neighborhood is worth more than getting on a plane to Davos. I'm sure there's a better example.
Well, absolutely. And there's lots of things to say about that. But the main one is to agree. But the two quick things are like, I guess part of this is about overcoming disconnection. That a lot of these problems, and even the problems in our economic system in the form of capitalism we currently live in, are to do with separation. We don't see the effects, that often harmful effects of the things we do, the things we buy, etc. And if we could, that's where this myth around how human nature plays into this is allowed to kind of exist. Is this idea that, well, we're all bastards here, we're all competitive, and it's a dog-eat-dog world, and it's cutthroat, and if you don't do it, somebody else will. And I'm like, that is rubbish. That is absolutely rubbish. When people understand the connection between their actions and the way it affects the world, people are brilliant, amazing, kind. They don't do, the vast majority of stuff would never do things to harm others, to cause problems to the environment or nature or other communities if they could see the effects of those things. So there's a really important thing here that I think we've created a culture through globalization that allows us to take more responsibility than we're cognitively capable of. So those people at Davos, like it's not a place I've ever been. It's not a place I'm ever aspiring to go. Like to even be having conversations where you're trying within the capabilities of one human mind to fathom how you're going to do something that affects the 8 billion plus people on the planet. That's not how we work very well. But how we do work really well is practically, empirically, kindly with our communities around us, where we can see the effects. If we do this, that happens. Are we happy with that? Yes, no. Do we want to change it? Yes, no. Can we? Yes. Let's be creative. We're all creative. So much ingenuity comes out of community action when people can see what they need. I need food. I need energy. They can see how they can create it. Here's some ideas. They can see the effects of that. This is going to have this economic effect or this environmental effect. Are we happy with that? And they come up with brilliant solutions when they can see those connections. So I think I agree that it happens best in our communities where we can suddenly relook at the basics that we're all kind of living within and need, and we can just decide for ourselves, how do we want those to operate? And you can, that is all so achievable at that level, and all of our brilliance, kindness, collaboration, creativity, connection can come to the fore, which it can't do so well at that big scale. Like that is, it's just too big, distant, separated away to think about these things. And I don't have so much hope that that's ever going to crack it. But if we all can learn what works where we are, we can all combine our ideas, our kindness, our connectivity, our empathy with each other to come up with brilliant solutions in our neighborhood, in our local area, and then share what we find with others, so that when somebody does come up with a great idea, they can at least offer that up to others. And so that we all start to speed up how much we can kind of make progress on these things. That is a really powerful way to create change.
That is beautiful. That's I've got what I came for, Matt. I'm really happy. We can link to everything in the show notes, but for those people like, jogging or hoovering or whatever they're doing, where can we find you online? What's the best place to connect? And
So check out the podcast. It's called Screw This, Let's Try Something Else. It's on Apple and Spotify. It will be on other platforms, but that's where it is for now. We've made it in partnership with Immediate, who are a company with track record in mainstream podcasts and things. So we've gone down that route partly to get it in front of mainstream audiences, so people can start to hear these stories in mainstream culture. So listen to that. Tell us what you think. Right. And so the way to see the other stuff is antidotelive.studio. That's antidotelive.studio is our website. And from there, you can find your way to the podcast and the social media channels. We're Antidote Live on Instagram and Antidote_live on TikTok. And I'm on LinkedIn, Matt Golding. And there's a Substack, which you can find from my LinkedIn. So a lot of the thinking behind this is shared in those places, but also just the examples of, and all of it is a giant experiment. I am learning by doing in public what works in the same way that the communities that I'm telling stories of are. So I'm not saying I know the answers. I can share what I'm trying and what I'm doing and really welcome feedback. positive and negative. Like we learn through both of those things, and more from the things that aren't working than the things that are. So this is all done with a sense of humility, creativity. Let's give it a go. And so check it out and let me know what you think, because I would love to hear.
I love that. I love that swagger and approach to it all. So we're going to put links to all the show notes in there. So all those links will be in the show notes, forgotten how to speak. And also in the show notes, every week there's links to European Co-working Day, which is on the 6th of May. And all you need to do right now is go and register your space. And a lot of that, I could give you a whole load of things about what European Co-working Day is about, but it basically is everything we talked about in this podcast. There's also the Co-working Alliance Summit on the 3rd of June, which is everyone that runs Co-working Switzerland, London Co-working Assembly, Rural Co-working Project. And again, a lot of the energy we talked about with Matt in this podcast is in that online conference there. And as always, there's the LinkedIn co-working group. And wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle. Say goodbye, Matthew.
Thanks very much. Goodbye, everyone.